Join us in Omaha, Nebraska on Saturday, October 5th, 2024, as I'm proud to present the most unique and fun paranormal event in the United States this year. Historic Haunted Heartland, Part 3, Reconsider Everything. Presented live on stage at the beautiful Benson Theater in the heart of Omaha. The fun starts with the pride of Alabama, the paranormal researcher and investigator that has the paranormal community all abuzz, Joshua Darren. Next, veteran paranormal researcher, lecturer, and motivational speaker Dustin Perry from Ghost Hunters will captivate the audience. And finally, back by popular demand, Omaha welcomes to the stage paranormal and occult expert John E. L. Tenney. He's going to leave you absolutely spellbound as he delivers one of his signature weird lectures. Tickets are available this summer, and I invite you to visit Necronomicast.com. Follow the show on Facebook for more information. Historic Haunted Heartland 3, Reconsider Everything. Brought to you by Necronomicast, Saturday, October 5th, 2024, a night that can change your life or your afterlife. From Omaha, Nebraska, the capital city of the historic Haunted Heartland, my name is Brian Corey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all, young and old, to this special episode of the world-famous Necronomicast. Tonight, it's my great pleasure to welcome to the program Katie Paige. Katie has been on a quest to uncover the truth about the strange phenomena that she has experienced throughout her life, starting with her experiences growing up in an environment of high strangeness in Colorado. That's motivated her to become a leader and director for the Colorado MUFON organization. She conducts field investigations, UFO research in the Colorado area, but she's recognized worldwide as a respected and valued author, lecturer, presenter, and speaker. So let's uncover the vast mysteries of the Rocky Mountains with Katie Paige on this episode of Necronomicast. And now, calling in on the Newsmaker Hotline from Colorado, the land of high strangeness. It's my honor to bring to the show. I'm super excited to have this conversation with Katie Paige. Katie, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
I'm super excited to have you on. I have heard about you, and I knew you had all this great UFO and high strangeness investigation research and this career that with MUFON and everything. But honestly, I didn't hear any of your lectures or this stuff until you gave a riveting presentation for the University of Nebraska, Omaha. They hosted a MUFON conference earlier this year. And well, because of snow, you weren't able to fly in, but you gave this incredible Zoom presentation that it was so riveting that it didn't matter that you weren't able to fly in because of the weather, because I was, first of all, you had a great internet connection there in the Rockies. But the content was so good and everything with the technology was so good. Everything worked. And I was like, I got to get Katie Paige. Mental note, got to get Katie Paige on the show. So I'm super excited to welcome you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, good old Starlink. I'm happy. Before we had the Starlink up here, it was hit or miss. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, I thought, oh, great. We're going to, the featured guest can't come in because of weather, which is fine. But I'm like, great. It's going to be over Zoom, which is going to be a nightmare. But no, it was super clear and I could hear and you could hear our questions. I was like, this is working way too good. I can't believe it.
As a state director or ex-state director for Colorado MUFON, I know we tried to do some Zoom things, and sometimes you're right. Sometimes they don't go off so well. So I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, so that's cool that you were able to join me on the show. And I know you were super busy. We had to reschedule because you were hosting a conference earlier in the year, June or July. What was that all about?
The Contact in the Desert, it wasn't hosting, but I work for them. And, I was on 4 different panels and was a speaker there. And that's always a super great event out there in California. And then doing the Beyond Skinwalker shows and kind of starting up Rocky Mountain Ranch research. And, I used to do a podcast on KGRA. I was just asked to be co-host on UAP Studies podcast with Jason Guillemot and Dr. Michael Gleason. And then that's been fabulous. But now kind of my new project is I want to take people with me as I investigate, as I go on location and do interviews and try to replicate some of the things they're doing on Beyond Skinwalker and just kind of doing a on location type of show on my channel for Rocky Mountain Ranch Research. So, how, when you're starting something like that from the ground up, it takes a bit of time and a bit of work. So it's been occupying a lot of my podcast times, but I'm happy to be on, and I'm glad we got to work it out. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're working on a new documentary. Is that what you just said? Is it going to be?
Well, I'm starting it's called Rocky Mountain Ranch Research, and it's kind of I'm going to do YouTube and other platforms where I'm kind of taking people along with me as I do investigations and research and interviews and whatnot. So, we'll see how it goes. But I'm looking forward to it, because for me, that's what it's always been about, is to share the research and to learn from others. And I want everybody to help me figure out what the heck's going on and has been going on for decades out there in Elbert County, Colorado. And, one of the questions I had, because, when I was a young girl from the 75 to 78, Linda Moulton Howe got her start out there. And it was like daily, it was affecting hundreds of people, what was going on out there, the cattle mutilations, strange helicopters, and all sorts of other things. And we can get into that. But the question's always been, how much of this is Black access military projects, and how much of it is actual paranormal, unexplained types of events. So, the more I could take people along and get opinions, and you'd be amazed at how people have little pieces of the puzzle, and you start putting those together and you're like, aha,
Yeah. And when you say pieces of the puzzle, like admittedly, I'm really a hardcore, like ghost and haunting and history kind of guy, and really into Bigfoot and everything. So when you're talking pieces of the puzzle, like I was listening to your lecture, your presentation that you gave to us, you're wrapping in things like weird paranormal things and weird things with Sasquatch sightings. And so of course that piqued my interest, and I'm getting more and more well-versed, I think, in the world of UFOs and everything. It's a very daunting task to kind of jump in after you've been a ghost and monster guy forever, to jump into UFOs.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool, because I kind of started, because I think a lot of these are connected, all these different, the Sasquatch, the paranormal, ufology and all that. And so I kind of started, way back in the 90s in the paranormal world. That's kind of where I started. I was a huge fan, and still am, of the Ghost Hunter show.
Yeah.
So they put on some events at the Stanley Hotel out here in Estes Park, Colorado, attended those, a couple of those, and then flew out to the St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida and hung out with like Steve and Tango and Grant and all that, and had some really cool experiences. So ghost hunting is a passion of mine as well. And that hitchhiker effect, for those who haven't had the book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, is kind of the follow-up book to Hunt for the Skinwalker, about the Skinwalker Ranch out there in Utah. But Skinwalkers at the Pentagon really kind of delves deep into this hitchhiker effect of the paranormal and things that kind of follow. And I don't know why certain people are more affected than others, but it seems to attach to certain people, right? I'm sure you've experienced that as well. Out there in the paranormal world, that, even on the show Ghost Hunters, you have Jason and Grant that would get things all the time happening. And then you had the others that not so much. And I don't know if that's our expectations and our beliefs that cause that to happen, or what that is. But that certainly has been the case for me, this hitchhiker phenomenon throughout my life. So, and it's more paranormal in nature.
I think once you open that door to the unexplained, and open the door and open yourself up to these mysteries, the more they present themselves to you, for sure. You just start to notice more too around the world around you.
Yeah, that's true. And there's some good research out there about disassociation and people, whether it's through near-death experience, trauma is a big cause for people to disassociate out of their bodies, meditation, no matter the means of you kind of disassociating and leaving your body. It seems to me that when people do that and do that often, they tap into something else out there. And once that connection is made, it sort of just stays with you. And it doesn't really matter where you are on the planet, you're connected into something else. And you bring up a good point too. Once you have these experiences and you're open to them, you're going to experience them and notice them more. Just like kind of like signs, synchronicities, and symbols. Once you're like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere around you. And once you're awoken to that, it's like, oh yeah, it happens quite frequently.
Yeah, you just brought up something too. Like I'm working on this kind of concept, and I'm not like an originator of this. I'm just exploring it on my own too. But the interconnectedness of human consciousness, like through, and I'm a musician, so like through music. So like I'm like the last couple shows, I've had musicians on and talking about like the like hidden, unseen, or unspoken things, like almost telepathic kind of connections that we make as musicians on a stage between each other. The people in the audience with, interacting that way psychically with musicians in a way, or musicians with the audience, like feeding all this weird energy off of each other through musical performances, and being connected through time and space. Like I can listen to music that Beethoven wrote that's being performed now, and feel like what people in the past were, a total weird rabbit hole, but like,
no, it's fascinating to me, and it comes up over and over and over again. Even on UAP Studies podcast, we talk about it quite often because Jason's an artist and a musician, and there's so many just people who are musicians and artists and creative people that I don't know if it's because we're just more open-minded in a sense or what that is, but you hear it over and over and over again. My oldest son, Dustin, is a musician as well. But he's kind of like, mom's a little crazy.
Yeah. I got a lot.
He wants to have experiences. Like my mom just recently passed, and I'm telling mom, like, give Dustin a good experience because he needs that. It's one of those things, people want to have the experience and they don't have it. And I don't understand why. And you can't make it happen for them. It's just this weird thing. I don't know, but I hope someday he has an experience and we'll turn him around. Cause I just think it makes life so much more interesting to be open to these things, and to actually see all the wonderment that is all around us. And, you mentioned Sasquatch, Bigfoot and all that. And I kind of avoided that subject for a long time because I didn't know what to make of it. I'm like, yeah, no such thing.
Right.
But with the Colorado Ranch, I couldn't avoid it because it's on all these reports. It's in the original reports, and so many people. And once I kind of, Trey Hudson, who has his the meadows out there down south, I went out there a couple times with them. And Grumpy Bob, who recently passed away, he was on some of those Bigfoot shows. And that was the first time I had exposure to how big of a community that world is. It's just like ufology, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And learning more about that. And I started watching some of the shows, and there's so much to that, just like ufology, that there has to be something to that as well,
So are you kind of the cool mom or the weird mom, or
all of the above? No, just kidding. Yeah. My kids are all grown now, and I have two grandchildren, and they're wonderful. 4 boys and a girl. Nice. And they're all awesome individual. Like I said, my oldest son is a musician. He actually got signed with David Ellefson of Megadeth back in the day. What? A Rise in Chaos. And he's, he does that screaming. Mom was in the mosh pit. I'm like, okay, check, bucket list done.
Wow.
Kind of thing. I'm very proud of my kids. And my second oldest son is a poker player. Jesse is a musician as well. My daughter is the smart scientist kind of girl. And then my youngest son right now is graduating from Spartan Aviation. So he's going to be an aviation mechanic.
Wow. So congratulations.
Thanks. I'm pretty proud of all of them. It's pretty awesome.
My oldest is going to college this year. I have one in high school and then one entering middle school. And like I'll, hey Dad, where are you going? Because I'll be dressed up or something. Like, where are you going? And I'm either playing a gig at night, awesome. or I'm investigating a creepy house, or giving a library
so you're
lecture.
The cool dad too.
I like to think so. I like to think so.
I love that. Middle school's a tough age. Oh boy.
Yikes! Yeah, man. It was tough for me. I think they're doing all right. Now, okay, so. You grew up, like you brought up this ranch, and I know you spent time at this ranch. It was Clearview back in the day, but now it's called the Rocky Mountain Ranch.
Yeah, I kind of adopted that because of Beyond Skinwalker. History Channel is going to get the biggest publicity out there. So I just sort of adopted that name for a while. I was calling it the Elbert County Ranch because back in the day, first of all, let me just kind of set up. I did not live on this ranch property full time.
Right.
My mother was dating the gentleman that owned the ranch, and he was going through a divorce or a separation from his wife. So my mom was dating Jack that owned the ranch, and they had 3 sons. The 2 youngest sons lived with us about 45 minutes away to attend a larger school district. So we would drive back and forth to the ranch, sometimes spend weekends on the ranch, that kind of thing. But for 3 years, I was hearing everything that was going on. My big sister and I both had individual experiences on the ranch property, and we had combined experiences out there on the ranch property that we remembered. But we were threatened and warned never to talk about what was happening out there. And I could tell you why that happened. And it was really cool. So let me get this out here. John Schuessler, who is one of the founding fathers of MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network, and when he learned of my connection to the ranch, he bestowed upon me the original briefing document out there. And it went by Clearview because the townspeople wanted to keep the location secret. They didn't, credibility was an important factor. They didn't want people coming into the town. So the location of the place was not known. And it was fascinating. After I joined MUFON, I came in right as a field investigator. I'm sorry if you can hear the trash truck out my window.
No.
But Monday's trash day. But I bought the book Hunt for the Skinwalker. This is before Skinwalker Ranch was, it didn't have a TV show. It really wasn't as popular as it is today. But I purchased the book. And in that book was a chapter called Other Hot Spots. And I started reading that chapter, and they were talking about a ranch in Colorado, and that APRO investigated it. They didn't know the actual location of the ranch. And I started reading the weird dynamic of the family. Dr. Leo Sprinkle out of Laramie, Wyoming, PhD, who was really well known for past life regression and hypnotherapy, was one of the investigators with APRO at the time investigating the ranch, along with John Durr, PhD, and Peter Van Arsdale, PhD. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe anybody knew anything about this place. I called my sister right away. I called my mom right away. You're not going to believe this. And it's just been nonstop ever since that time. But so, I went out there publicly, and I was, hey, Elbert County, this is where the ranch is. And, it's just kind of taken off from there. And I'm really grateful that it has, because like I said, one of the questions was this just a short-term time period where the high strangeness was really high, and was it Black Access military projects? Because it's really close to Colorado Springs and the Black Forest. So we have NORAD, Air Force Academy, Camp Carson, and on and on and on.
Right.
Or was this a hot, high strangeness location? And what I have found out, I think it's both. And I think the high strangeness activity predates some military presence.
Well, okay. So my friend Robert Sandalwood, who is a UFO guy here in town, shout out Robert. He's like, do you want to go to this lecture, this presentation at the university? I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And Katie Paige and some other people are going to be there. Great. And then you start telling the story about this ranch. And how, from what I know about UFOs and things that I've read about and studied and I'm brushing up on, of course, all the Air Force bases and the Air Force Academy and all these places. But then you start telling the story about this ranch, and I was even taking notes. I mean, you were talking about things like these crazy humming sounds and blacked out military helicopters harassing people, paranormal activity, Bigfoot, cryptids, strange bird-like creatures. I mean, like, my gosh, it's like a Mothman over there. Snowless circles, and then of course, like, you were blowing my mind with these cattle mutilations, and just like Colorado just has this hotbed of activity, and you grew up. Spent time as a child in this renowned hotspot of activity. Crazy.
Right. Yeah. So much so I'm thinking, and this just dawned on me a couple of years ago, because 1977 Close Encounters of the Third Kind comes on, and they have the dead cattle and, the Devil's Tower and all that. I thought it was a documentary back in the day, because I'm like, I'm living that during that year. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, oh, I bet other people just see this as like a sci-fi movie. I did not see it that way, because I was living that life. And so it's really mysterious. And of course, Snippy the horse in Alamosa in the San Luis Valley is a hotbed of activity out there. Dulce Base and all that, just right over the border there in New Mexico. And really this whole Midwestern area. So you're in Nebraska, your neighbor. But, in doing the research, and, there's a great PDF, I'll have to send it to you, but it's called The Choppers and the Choppers. And they were really looking at this blacked out helicopter phenomenon. But we're talking, from Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, just the whole Midwestern part of the country had these rashes of mutilations going on. So much so, when I went to Florida to interview the undersheriff, Bill Waugh, his widow, and his son, I wanted to hear from them to talk about what they experience. And same thing, cryptids, Sasquatch, mysterious helicopters, paranormal stuff going on in their home there. I mean, you name it. But in the police department there in Kiowa, they had a map where they were keeping track of mutilations that were going on. And these were going on almost daily. Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved. The governor of the state was involved because people were arming themselves. They were like in terror. They're going to go to humans next, because we're talking cows, sheep, horse, dog, multiple ones a day. So they would get like a mutilation in Montana, a mutilation in Colorado, almost at the exact same time. And they were pinning these things on these maps. So what the heck is all that about? I don't know. I kind of avoided the mutilation phenomenon for so long because it's just so convoluted and controversial. Is it the military testing groundwater, mad cow disease? What's happening? But they're still going on to this day, not to the extent they were back then. But I just think a lot of these ranchers aren't reporting them. Colorado MUFON had a recent mutilation case that's being investigated now. Getting to know some of these ranchers out there in Elbert County. Just a little, like 8 months ago, there was a mutilation, and this was a $5,500 prize bull. Yeah. And so the woman checks them in the morning, checks them at night. She checked it in the morning. This is in the middle of the day. They're miles off the main county roads. The cow's completely mutilated with the same kind of thing. No predators will approach it. No insects, tongue removed, eye removed, udders, that whole thing where it's like cauterized, blood drained in the middle of the day. Just boom, just this $5,500 prize bull mutilated. So this just recently happened. So it's still happening.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. I caught you on a documentary. Yeah. I think it was called On the Trail Night Watchers by Small Town Monsters.
Right.
And there was a lot about, well, you mentioned Snippy the horse. I mean, that was like the very first, or one of the very first documented cases of cattle mutilation that was totally unexplained. Like precision surgical cauterized cuts, finer than any scalpel. The precision of organs being removed, no blood. I mean, it's insane. It's an insane mystery to me.
Yeah, what's really cool is I just met just a few weeks ago, actually. There's a gentleman named Joe Spencer, and he was one of the first 3 people to be on location at the Snippy Horse event. And so Carrie King, who it was his auntie who owned horse. The horse's name was Lady originally, but snip, 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 Snippy.
Right.
So Carrie King actually met us out there, and I just did an interview, and I hope to get this out on my Rocky Mountain Ranch research. I'm going to make an episode of the interview with Joe Spencer and some new. And he's like, I just want to get the record straight. I was one of the first 3 people there on location of Snippy the horse. And the radioactivity around the site was spiked. What's really interesting, they searched for the horse for a couple of days, and they ended up finding the horse not too far from the home, a place where they had searched, sort of like David Pilates with Missing 411, where you're looking for missing people. They're searching these locations for days, nothing. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's the missing person. Same thing with Snippy. Boom, there's the horse. And he talked about this green radioactive type gel that was found there that they actually took. We don't know what happened to it, but Carrie's like, oh, I hadn't heard that part before, and these indentations in the ground around the location of the horse, certain things like that. So it was a really great interview. And I was really happy that he reached out to me and we were able to do that, I like these old historic cases, and it's really not too late to go back and revisit those, because I think there's still information to be gleaned and learned from those things.
And it's nice that nowadays people are going out and remembering these stories and documenting them, because every day, with all these kind of phenomena, like the researchers of the past, somebody dies every day, and a lot of that,
Yeah.
or a witness dies and they haven't had a chance to show or tell their story. And
Mhm.
like a lot of that important information goes by the wayside. So yeah, kudos to you
Right.
for going out and gathering all this information and talking to people and getting
Right.
all this witness testimony on the record of people saying what they've experienced or what they've heard. And, even if you don't believe everything or all things that people say, it's very important to get the stories down and documented for sure.
Right. And what's important about that too, and if it's a one-off, that's one thing. If somebody but when you have a whole, like the
Mm,
whole area of Elbert County, from Franktown to Elizabeth to Kiowa, Simla, Rama, and you have these ranchers that are coming forward, where and this is where I'm grateful for like the Navy coming forward and the hearings that we've had, because it's made it not so taboo to talk about it, where people were like, I'm not going to talk about any of these strange things because people are going to label me whatever.
right.
And that's starting to ease up a little bit. So now, more than ever, people are being more open about these experiences. And, where one thing's a one off, but when you have 2, 3, 4, 20, 30, 40 people having the same experiences, then it becomes okay, something's going on and we need to pay attention to it. Even the cryptid birds that were reported in here,
Yeah.
things like these, like large pterodactyl sightings or like phoenixes. And even when we were shooting rockets for Beyond Skinwalker, we're there with the rocket guys. And this is when we had the smaller rockets and we're just like kind of poking the hornet's nest to see if we'll get any responses. And it sounded like large bird flappings in the tree line right behind the ranch house. And I look at the rocket guy, I can't remember his name. I'm like, did you hear that? And he's like, yeah, I heard that. And we're like looking, expecting, there was nothing there, but you could hear it. And it was in the same area, by the way, where first time back on the ranch since I was a kid, unexpected snowstorm. It was late at night. It was freezing cold. I wasn't prepared, wearing jeans, multiple layers. And the film crew was behind me and we're going over. They're like, show me where you had this box encounter, which was the daytime, these strange, mysterious boxes. And I had an encounter in the daytime of seeing this strange box hovering 3 to 4 feet off the ground. It was making like a bee sound, like an electrical noise. And I just remember my mom's boyfriend, me and the youngest son, get in the truck, get in the truck. It's the box, it's the box. And we jump in the truck. A crazy, crazy time. So I'm walking the film crew back there at night, kind of crazy. But in the snow, because it was coming down really hard, you see these bipedal footprints coming out of nowhere, one stride in front of the other, maybe a 6-foot stride. They're going for a little ways and they disappear for maybe 10 to 12 feet, reappear, and then disappear again. It was the weirdest thing, is that it was as if there's Bigfoot there, or I like calling him Sasquatch, but if there is a creature there, are they somehow manifesting, can appear and disappear? Are they underground in these aquifers, in these voids? And I have no idea, because what's fascinating to me about the area in Sasquatch is if you look at Google Maps at Elbert County, you have wooded areas, but it's not like the Rocky Mountains or like Washington State or up in Canada, where you have these mountainous areas where a Bigfoot could hide away. Even here where I am right now, it would make more sense to me to have Bigfoot. But in Elbert County, it's kind of flat and ranchy, and you have these open areas. And you would think if there was a creature like that living there, whether it's a cryptid bird, a large bird, or a Sasquatch, you would have evidence of that. They would be seen more often. So they have to be interdimensional type of being that can appear or disappear or go underground, or I don't know what, but those prints were there. There's no denying that, out of nowhere. And just recently we were out visiting Jeff McBurney out at Mount Wilson Ranch, and he's taken us up to the cave. Same thing. We come across these very unusual prints in the snow that come out of nowhere, couple prints and gone. But they were smaller and you could see the toe marks on them. I have pictures of them. But wow. What is that? I have no idea. They're not bear. They don't have bear up there. They're not elk. They're not deer. So you can check off everything they're not. And that kind of leaves you scratching your head.
Yeah. How crazy. Like I could just see you guys like going out and film a show, and you're kind of like going through showing places where you've encountered things, and you're recounting information. All of a sudden there's fresh new evidence right there as you live and breathe.
Yeah, no, that was my biggest fear, because this was so many decades ago, and I'm like, what if we go there and nothing happens?
Right.
What if, it's all dead? And but it was quite opposite of that. And something that didn't make the episode, but that next day of, seeing the prints and the snowstorm and all that. And I had a vest on, a hoodie on, a sweater on. I was freezing cold because I wasn't prepared for the snowstorm. But the next day we had a day off of filming. So my daughter actually came down to Castle Rock, and we went to there's outlet stores there, and we went to the Columbia store and buying hats and gloves and long johns and everything. Right. And then after that, we went to Red Robin for lunch.
Okay.
And my shoulder just started bothering me. And I'm like, oh man. So I went back to the hotel room. I'm like, Jenna, is there anything on my back? And it looked like 3 claws, like a handprint. It was hot to the touch. It had blisters and it was quite large. It literally looked like something did this onto my shoulder. And I don't know if it was a radiation burn, but they did film it the next day because I'm like, oh my gosh, it freaked my daughter out. We went and bought white candles because it's as if something, and I had multiple layers of clothing on. I didn't lean up against anything. I don't know how that appeared there. So, and I have photos. I'll send you a photo of that so you could see it, but it's quite like, whoa, it looks like a handprint to me.
So you guys went out and bought white candles to kind of.
Yeah. And I talked to John Dover. He's one of the, ex-paranormal rangers out there. And I was in Arizona doing the MUFON boot camp. And I told him about the things I was experiencing out there back on the ranch property. And, he kind of walked me through doing some protection ceremonies and that with bitter and different sage and stuff like that. And same with the paranormal. It's always good to go in any investigative, Brian, with the right state of mind and protection, because you don't know who or what you're dealing with, and you don't want any negative things attaching to you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Boundaries are a must.
Yes.
There's the physical dangers of going into like an old house or something like that. Like you don't want to fall through the floor, but then there's also things, you got to establish boundaries. Crazy.
Right. For sure. Right.
So
the right mental intention.
Yeah. I just keep thinking like a minute ago, you mentioned like the work of David Pilates and his missing 411. And sometimes some people kind of attribute cryptid, to the disappearance of people or UFOs or just portals and weird things like that. And you brought it up, and these weird things that are happening in Colorado that seem to center around weird lights in the sky. I mean, like when you were talking as a kid, you were seeing orbs and bright lights and disembodied voices. Like these things have been going on forever. And I think like between your work and David's work and other researchers' work, like everybody's kind of gathering this information and try and make connections between all these things. Do you like, not asking about like him specifically, but I mean, do you reach out to other investigators and just kind of compare notes? Like, what are you working on now? And not to steal each other's ideas, but just like, I think like collaboration is a key to figuring out. Well, I think
that's so important. And we have had David when he was living here locally in Colorado. He was a guest speaker a couple of times for the Colorado MUFON chapter, and a great guy. And I think in his film, something he touched on, which is maybe one of the key pieces to this, in my opinion, from my research too. And I just recently did an interview I actually pulled it off of Rocky Mountain Ranch research because of the wind. We had to buy new equipment, so I'm going to re-interview him and have better equipment so we don't have the wind sound. But he's an elk hunter, firefighter, very credible guy, has lived in Elbert County for decades. He's out elk hunting. It's getting dusk. He's walking back to his pickup truck, and not too far in the distance, he sees what he just describes as 2 bundt cake pans, one on top of the other. I wonder if I have my drawing right here. I can hold it up. Yes, it's right here. This is a drawing he made for me. I'll hold it up here.
Oh, wow.
He said it did orange glow in the tree line.
Yeah.
Top was spinning counterclockwise. The bottom was spinning clockwise. No sound. He watched this thing for over 10 seconds, which is fairly long when you're watching something like this. Turned back and the thing was just gone, hovering off the ground. So when I went out there just recently to do the interview with him, he said, he's a big, tough guy. And still in the daytime, there's areas in Elbert County where he just feels uneasy and he won't even go into these areas. And this is one of those areas. So the three, I'm like, well, let's, we're a group, we can walk together, and they have mysterious dead elk in this area as well. So we're walking back there, and there's these bushes in kind of these lower bushes where this thing was hovering. But you walk behind these bushes. In the back, the forest gets super thick and dense, like Fangorn Forest from Lord of the Rings kind of thing. But there's this big open, like round area, perfect place for this thing to be hovering. And right under it is an elk trail. So David Pilates talks about in that Missing 411, the UFO connection, this connection with elk. And he talks about the Carl Higdon case in Rawlins, Wyoming. And in that, they have a box in that case as well. And there's the other cases where you have elk involved. And so I'm thinking, I think the aquifers that he brings up in the elk in certain cases are an important piece to the puzzle. And certainly this case, this happened November of 2021. So this was a recent sighting out there. No idea. He's like, if it's a drone, why is it out there? He said it was 4 to 5 feet in diameter, maybe a little bigger now since we went out there and we were kind of looking from where his truck was parked to where this was. And he said it was 6 to 8 feet off the ground. So insane. It's really fascinating that these kind of things are still happening to this day,
For sure. Now I know, aside from your documentaries and your television work and your research and everything, you're an author too, and you wrote in a book, Letters of Love and Light: 4 Decades of UFO Encounters, Experiences, and Sightings with ufologist Dr. Leo Sprinkle. And you talked a lot about Dr. Sprinkle lovingly in your presentation to the University of Nebraska Omaha MUFON group. So Dr. Sprinkle wasn't like one of the UFO names that I thought of, but since you gave that presentation, I've read like more about him and his work and everything. What an important figure. And you wrote an important book, documenting like his life and research.
Yeah, no, it was really a labor of love because selfishly, I went there to get all the original ranch documents, but I found myself, my kids were in those, late high school years. And it was like a nice escape to just go to a quiet archives. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Mom gets a break.
Right.
So that's number one. But number two, he had over 70 boxes of letters that people wrote to him from around the world. And I found myself getting lost in all these letters. Fascinating. And not only that, but he kept his response letters. Mm-hmm. So here's a man who spent over 40 years really researching the field. He was like a pioneer in the field, right? And we had letters from Linda Howe, from Phil Klass, the debunker, and all these people. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great stuff. And I was taking pictures and pictures, hundreds of pictures. And then one night in a dream, because I lucid dream a lot, because he would sign his letters, Love and Light Leo. That's how he signed his book. And I said, oh my gosh, if I find these letters interesting, other people will. So for 3 years, I went back and forth to the archives, pulled different boxes, took pictures, organized them into folders, read the letters, pulled out the juicy parts of the letters. One letter I found was from the 50s from Snowflake, Arizona, of a pastor who had a very similar experience as Travis Walton in 1975. And then here. So letters from children. Here's the book right here. Yeah. Letters from children. And then, of course, Leo's words. But for me, Leo was the first person who was like, hey, Katie, sit down and let's talk. And he was so gracious with his time. And he was the first person to really actually sit down and listen to me seriously about all the things my sister and I experienced on the ranch. And didn't laugh, didn't snicker, was really, truly interested in it. And that's why he holds such a dear place in my heart, because finally somebody's listening seriously to what had happened to us. And so I was really happy to finish this before he passed away. And one of my dearest treasures is over there in this glass case in that corner. Mm-hmm. And it's a letter from Dr. Sprinkle talking about how much he loved the book and how, and so it was up here we get a lot of fires. So we had a fire drill or, evacuation last summer. And that was one of the very first things that went in the Jeep. That letter from Leo, because it's how much that means to me. Yeah.
Well, it was a really neat part of the presentation too, because when I was invited to go to this and I went, I didn't know what I was going to hear. I thought, well, we'll hear about lights in the sky. Right. We'll hear, and not to poo poo on people's presentations and everything, but you gave this long, loving, description about his life and his work and about your work putting the book together, and then your interesting life, as a child experiencing all these things and what led you to now your kind of life's passion of researching and documenting all this stuff and getting people's stories and creating content and writing books. But you're also writing another book too. You're writing a book, and let's change the name of it, but the Rocky Mountain Ranch, Crafts, Cattle, Cryptids, and Cover-Ups.
Right. Yeah.
How's that one going?
Well, it's it should have been done a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. This is why I believe in the universe's plans, because had I finished the book a couple years ago, it would have missed all what happened with Beyond Skinwalker and all the things with my, season 2, we did episode 1. I can't talk a lot about it because of non-disclosures, but there's a second episode coming up for season 2, and my sister comes with me to the ranch. And so all these things that I'm able to talk about after those episodes air get to be in the book now. So there's a reason why it's been on the back burner, but I hope to have it finished within the next year. I mean, I really do need to finish it. If for no other reason, just to get all the work I've done into one place, so it's out there for his historical sake, but it's slowly coming together.
Just when I think I've heard it all, somebody will tell me like a ghost story or some kind of experience story, and I'm like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" And it makes me, it kind of shakes me a little bit. Mm-hmm. I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to say, have you gotten ever to a point where you're just kind of like, and then all of a sudden, boom, you hear a story or you get a revelation or you turn over the page and you read something else, and it just sparks that curiosity, that craziness all over again?
Yeah. I mean, as silly as it sounds, just like anybody who does this, sometimes your passion will kind of ebb and flow a little bit. And I'm like, maybe I'll get into selling life insurance or something. I don't know. and so that happened for like a minute.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, something will call some synchron. That's when I like contact in the desert. Hey, we need somebody to do this. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that because this is what I love. But something always pulls me back on to what I'm doing. I feel like even if I wanted to, I'm just sort of in it, or some other new revelation will come, even with that disembodied voice. So one of the most scary nights on the ranch, it was the boys' mother's birthday. All the adults are playing board games in the wee hours of the night. My sister and I and the 3 boys were hanging out in the boys' bedroom. That hum sounds comes up. The room, although power goes out in the house, that's when that disembodied voice comes in. My sister and I remember it very well. And the reason I know exactly what it said is it's because it's in this document quoted from the time. And I was like, oh, yeah, there it is. Oh my gosh. And it basically says, attention, yes. We have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends, meaning my mom, my sister, and I, will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And that my mother took very seriously. So we were like, don't talk about what's going on out there. And then all these years later, this is just an example of how I keep getting put back on and something will stir my interest. I learn about plasma ball technology, which is, the military is developing, where they can pipe human sound out, out on the battlefield. So it kind of protects our men and women out there. I'm sure wars would be fought very differently now in our day and age with drones and everything and lasers. However, when I played that example of plasma ball technology, if you search on just do a Google search on plasma ball and you can hear the voice sound, it sounds very similar to what we heard out there, which makes me think, were they experimenting with things out there? So again, we're back to the how much of it is military, how much of it is actual phenomenon, and it's a combination of both. Because what happened on my back, I can't explain. What happens paranormally at my home, I can't explain. Other things, mutilations, there's some really strange cases of these mutilations that can't be explained. So I'm left in both camps still. And I don't know if I'll ever figure it out, but I certainly will die trying.
Yeah. I mean, geez, all these mysteries. I mean, you just named a bunch of them. I mean, I remember being hooked on one summer, Art Bell was going crazy with Chupacabra stories. And I was just like, everything was chupacabra for a whole summer. And so I was learning about goat suckers and all this. And then you learn about cattle mutilations, and you learn about this. And then you learn about, is it a cryptid? Is it some kind of weirdly genetic modified creature that escaped? I'm like, whoa, time out.
Right. And then are we manifesting it? Do we play a role in it? Right. That's my other thing. Like, oh my gosh. Are we the creators of some of this? Because that would explain a lot. Like if we're in a virtual reality and this is one big stinking video game, that would explain all the Pascagoula weird guys. I mean, you have so many different variations of not only aliens, but cryptids, craft, chupacabras, all this stuff. It would explain all of that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe we are the creators of this stuff. Well, so that's a whole other path to go down.
Right. That's a big thing. Like with the supernatural ghost phenomenon too, is it, is it something that's actually physically out in front of us? Like a ghost is a thing that's out in front of us that we see, or is it like some kind of weird telepathic or psychical thing that we're picking up from the past or even the future? Who knows? Is it a near-death experience? Yeah. Is it a...
So many questions on the paranormal. My father passed in 96, and I did experience a lot of things when my dad passed. Yeah. Now, my mom recently passed, not so much. And I'm thinking, well, is it because, she was 92 years old? A lot of people went before her. So I'm thinking, I picture her up there, like visiting with her ex-husbands and, the husband she lost and her mother and her brothers, so many people. And I'm thinking maybe she's just too busy to come down and say hello. I mean, we've had a couple little things that are mysterious, but it makes me wonder. And then, I'm a fan of the Long Island Medium and Tyler Henry and, all that. And I do believe there are certain people that can communicate. Now, are they just picking up energies that they left behind, or are they actually talking to the spirit? Like I have so many questions about this. And especially when it's so, just losing my mom, it's like, I have so many questions to her. I'm always, well, what's going on? And then, between burial and cremation and the choices people make, if you choose to get cremated, can you still interact as a ghost, as a spirit? I don't know the answers to that, but it's just these rabbit holes we all go down. And I think it makes life really interesting. And it certainly keeps me curious and going and, researching and reading and everything I can gobble up, because there's so many questions and mysteries to our lives.
Yeah, I heard a great story. A couple of weeks ago, I gave a little lecture. I did some summer library lectures for teens and young adults, like intro to the paranormal kind of a thing, and ghostly tales around Omaha. And this one college girl who was working part-time at the library as she's on summer break, she's like, can I tell you a story? And I'm like, of course, I want to hear your story. And she was telling me like her grandma passed away. She was very close to her grandma, and her grandma was a piano player and always played Beethoven's For Elise, ba-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. And she's feeling really sad one day walking across campus, and she was passing underneath the bell tower that's on campus that plays music all over. And it was on her grandma's birthday, and just walking underneath it, Furley started playing right when she was walking underneath it. And she's like, do you think that's something? I'm like, yes.
Yes.
I'm like, yes. It doesn't have to be a spooky, woman in white that, wakes you up in the middle. Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it could just be a strange thing, just to see if you're paying attention. If it's just an experience,
I have a very similar story. My dad passed in 96. So 5 years later, I was standing in the kitchen of my old house. I had my sons around me. And for some reason, at the time I was teaching at an alternative high school, and I did the yearbook class, and I couldn't remember this very talented student's name. She was a beautiful artist. Couldn't remember her name. And what's funny about that, my maiden name is Nelson, and the girl's student's name was Chris Nelson, which is actually my sister's name. I'm like, how come I couldn't remember Christina Nelson? Anyway, so I'm pulling out the little yearbook. We're standing in the kitchen. I open it up to try to, and my dad's obituary floats down onto the kitchen floor. And I pick it up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my dad's obituary. And I look at the date. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's his birthday today. It was his 70th birthday. And I always would forget my dad's birthday. Sorry, Dad. And so me and the boys stood around saying happy birthday to my dad. Now, that just things like that just happen. It doesn't have to be scary or spooky. It's just a little, hey, remember today's my birthday.
That's
I want to hear happy birthday.
And that's all you needed. It didn't have to be anything else. It was just a paper floating down that you picked up and then you noticed.
And then it was like, oh.
See, I love those stories. I love those things.
Yeah.
It's the weird interconnectedness again, of all these things. If you just got to look for these connections or look for these weird experiences that are out there, and the mysteries of life, I don't know, but they make themselves known to us each and every day. Cool.
They do. And so many people have them. It just always blows my mind when people ask, what do you do? And I used to like, but now I don't, this is what I do. And I would say 8 times out of 10, somebody has either a UFO story or a story like that, or, just something synchronistic or unexplained. And all of us experience it. So it's just really cool.
Yeah. Weird lights in the sky or weird lights in your house. I mean, and it's like, I've heard orbs being described as forest ghosts, and that blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God, that's all I needed.
It's funny you mentioned that.
That's all I need to think about at 2 a.m.
I was good friends with one of the lead paranormal investigators of the Stanley Hotel, and she took me up to the cemetery up in the Rocky Mountains, and she was talking about fairy lights. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, fairy lights. Like, I draw the line at fairies. There's no such thing as fairies. What are you talking about?
Right.
Sure enough, I don't know if they're little fairies with wings, but there are these mysterious little lights. And they're not, we don't have lightning bugs up here. They're not lightning bugs. They're not, I don't know what they are. But so, yeah, I witnessed that. And even at Trey Hudson's down south, we had those same mysterious lights. And the next day me and Kristen are walking back looking for like reflective nails in the trees or things. I'm always trying to debunk everything. I'm one of those people.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't find it. I have no idea what they were. And they were showing up on the FLIR cameras and everything. So I don't know what those fairy lights are, but it's something. I don't know if they're just balls of energy or what,
Well, don't laugh at them. Don't laugh at those
I'm
stories.
not laughing,
Katie.
not anymore. Because what is that old saying,
Right, for sure.
Somebody loses a wing.
Well, having you on the program has been a real treat. Like I made notes, like during your presentation, I just was like thoughtful, great investigation. You're super polished and professional with great content, and you took the questions all in stride and with that presentation. So I was like, I gotta get Katie Paige on the show, and I'm so glad.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Questions is one of my favorite parts. I just love questions.
So okay, I know you've got your official website, Katie Paige. Is it com or net?
It's .net.
.net. KatiePaige.net. And then from there, there's links to different interviews, different things. You've got books for sale.
And I have a new website that I'm in the process of designing. It's a Rocky Mountain Ranch Research.org, .net or .com. I think I bought all 3, so they all should circle back to Rocky Mountain Ranch Research to kind of keep up what we're doing there. And the YouTube channel, I try to get as much stuff out there as soon as I can on Facebook and whatnot. But I certainly will link everything to KatiePaige.net as well. But I'm excited about this new project and taking all of you guys out there with me as I investigate and learn and research and interview, because I think that's important and fun on top of that. So that's kind of my new baby. So
I love it.
You could check me out there. And if you want to, anybody wants that Choppers and Choppers, I have a PDF copy of it. I'd be happy to send it. If you just reach out to me through my website, I'll get a copy to you too. It's a short read, but it's really fascinating.
I would
to read
love it. And I got to tell you, if you listen to my show a couple episodes back, you'll see a show called Optimistic Infinity House with a jazz musician friend of mine, Andrew Vogt. And he lives in Colorado. He lives in Fort Collins, where he's a jazz musician and in the Denver area. And he's just experienced weird paranormal things. And he's always out going on hikes, looking for lights in the sky. So I'm going to tell Andrew that if you do a presentation in Colorado, anything like that, he needs to go check out a lecture that you might give. But also, you should go check him out and say hi to him if you ever see a guy named.
Yeah, that would be great. Put him in touch with me. I would. Yeah, there's so much going on, and there is a conference coming up. I'll put it on my website out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That that's not too far of a drive for him. It should be a good little conference, and he could find information there. But yeah, it'd be interesting to catch up with him. And again, another musician.
Yeah, and he's super cool. Like I welcomed him on stage. I do these live shows every year for my show. And I had him on stage last year, and we did a whole psychical musical interaction with the audience before we brought psychic medium Cindy Keza up on stage to kind of do a psychic reading, which was nuts. She's the real deal. And you mentioned Ghost Hunters a little bit ago. I've got Dustin Perry from Ghost Hunters coming to do.
Dustin's awesome.
Yeah, he's going to come do my live show. But Katie, honest to goodness, like discovering you and your work and all the content that you've created and the things that you've been a part of, it's been great. Like getting to know you through the internet and your writings and your research, but also what a treat to have you on the show. Love talking to you.
Well, I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Well, there we go, everybody. Episode 278 of Necronomicast featuring Katie Paige. High strangeness, shenanigans in the Colorado mountains, the Rocky Mountains. Katie's great, and I mean it. If you got a chance to check out one of her lectures or presentations or anything that she's a part of, go do it. She brings a wealth of information, a work ethic, and just integrity to her presentations, to her lectures. Katie's great. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to her and attending her presentation. So, friends, episode 279 coming your way in the middle of August 15th, maybe. Going to be talking to Mr. Bryce Johnson, part of the cast of television's Expedition Bigfoot. Super excited to have Bryce on the show. You might have seen him in a little movie called Oppenheimer. He also has a fantastic podcast that I listen to regularly, and you should too, called Bigfoot Collectors Club. Bryce Johnson on the next episode of Necronomicast. Hope everybody's doing well. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I want to give a special shout out to my friend and yours, Cindy Keza. Cindy, thank you so much for the incredible piece of art. It's hanging behind me right now in Necronomicast headquarters. Everybody, thank you all for your support. Hope you have a great night, a great life. Now, go get some sleep.